Welcome everyone to the January 5th meeting of the New Bern Board of Aldermen. At this time, would you join me in a prayer? Heavenly Father, we just ask that you be with us tonight. We have several very important items, and we want to make sure that we are doing things that are pleasing to thee and in the best interest of our city that we all love. In your name we pray, amen. Would you join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag of our country? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Fiscal. Here. Alderwoman Harris.
She's here. She just visited.
Alderman Astor.
Here.
Mayor Outlaw.
Here.
Alderman Kinsey.
Here.
Alderman Best. Present. Alderman Odom.
Here.
Okay, now is that or is everybody here, or is how about Alderwoman Harris? How's that count?
I will note the time that she comes in.
Okay, you'll take care of the minutes, however that needs to go.
I wanted to wait, Mayor, if a couple of notes before we get into the agenda.
Right here.
In lieu of the fact that I see some citizens here that I know are wanting to hear the discussion of the ETJ, I'd like to pull the board. I believe at this time we should table that item until our next meeting, as we want to get some more information. Alderman Odom, is that what?
I was going to propose
requested?
we table it to the February 22nd meeting. I've asked for some information back from maps and things from staff, and it's going to take a little time to get that together.
Okay. Is that a motion and a second? Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. The motion carries. Mr. Hughes.
Mayor, I'm happy to announce tonight that after an extensive search, we have hired a new Director of Public Works. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Al Cablé. He comes direct from Oregon. He is former Director of Public Works for the City of Burlington, and we're really excited to have Al come in. His first day was yesterday. However, as we were doing storm preps, he did come in on Friday, and he sat with the guys to get a feel of how our operations are. So, Al?
Thank you, City Manager. Mayor, members of the board, I'm so happy to be here. Blessed to be your new Public Works Director. I also have my better half with me, my wife Charlotte, and my mother-in-law Everly here visiting too. And after that interesting presentation I heard on the funding, I can see that stormwater is a high priority, and we hear you loud and clear. Appreciate the team that I've been able to join, led by George, and I got introduced to Danny Meadows, the legendary Danny Meadows, and I'm so appreciative of the foundation that all these operationals have laid before, and I look forward to the challenge. Thank you for
Yes,
the
sir.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
Al,
you.
I want to say one thing about Danny Meadows. His favorite saying, the first thing he said to me the first time I came to this board, he said, you know, money can make the bear dance. So just remember that. That's how we get, isn't that what you said? That's how we get things done here. So welcome. And I know for one, I'm sure my colleagues will say that we heavily depend on Public Works for the needs of our citizens. Many times you will hear us calling you on a regular basis, and we welcome you and hope you will become our new best friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome to New Bern.
And I would also like to say a huge thanks to George Childs. He did a great job during the interim process. George, we appreciate all you've done.
Mayor, before
Yes.
we get into the next item too, I would ask now, I was waiting for Alderman Harris to come back in, but would you all mind just taking a minute to stand and give a round of applause to our leaders and our employees who got us through the storm this weekend? I think they deserve every bit of just saying thank you. Everybody from fire to police to our public works, our utilities people, it was incredible. I saw so many wonderful comments. They were out there in the cold and the rain, and they kept our citizens safe, and it was a great great deed for them to do, and I just appreciate them so much. We've talked about that. We were in our work session, but I wanted to make sure during our regular session that we acknowledged the wonderful work that they did. I didn't want to wait to the end of the meeting when everybody was out.
I just want to make a comment as well. I just want to give my condolences to one of our very own, Miss Alice Wilson, with the death in her family. So just keep her in prayers.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Hughes.
Next item on the agenda, Mayor, is administer the oath of office to our new Director of Finance.
Oh, we didn't do the consent agenda. I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Oh, okay. Motion second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Go ahead.
Okay, next item is to appoint our new Director of Finance. We'd like to ask Kim to come up and Brenda to get ready to swear her in.
Where's your family?
I think some of her family is under the weather, so they're watching remotely this evening.
Oh, okay.
We have a wonderful finance team here.
Well, that's your family.
Yes. I, Kimberly A. Ostrom, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, so help me God. I will. I, Kimberly A. Ostrom, do solemnly swear that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as Director of Finance, so help me God. I will. I, Kimberly A. Ostrom, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are or may be established for the government thereof, and that I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of said state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, to the best of my knowledge and ability, so help me God. I will. Get you to sign on those.
Kim, welcome and thank you for what you're doing. And at this time, are you ready to go to item number 6?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we have a short recess for
Okay.
10 minutes, please.
Motion
Yes.
and second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Mr. Hughes, we're going to get on with the remainder of this meeting at this time. We're going to go to item number 6, presentation of audit. Mr. Hughes.
All right, Mayor, Aldermen, at this time I'd like to introduce Mr. Stuart Hill. He's a CPA with the firm of Thompson, Price, Scott, Adams and Company, and he's going to make the presentation on the annual comprehensive financial report and audit.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I appreciate y'all having me tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to do your June 30th, 2021 audit, and we appreciate that opportunity. You should have a copy of the full audit report and also a presentation summary. We're going to work off the presentation summary for the time of it, because it would be too long and drawn out to try to go through the whole audit report, obviously. So if you have those with you, on page number 1, after the table of contents and all, there's a letter, and that's a required correspondence to governance that we're required to give you. I'm not going to read that, but I will go over some high points of it. Basically, first of all, we've actually submitted the full audit report to the LGC yesterday, January 24th, 2022. Your accounting practices are proper. We didn't have any major difficulties in the audit procedures. We didn't have any major disagreements with the management, as I'm aware of, and I'm not aware of any second opinions for other accounting firms that I'm aware of. There were 2 or 3 findings here, and those are in the categories of some negative fund balances, some reconciliation reports being not timely, and the audit report itself not being timely. Those things, the LGC is going to want you to send them a letter within 60 days of tonight. From the presentation, you have 60 days to send a letter to address that. We've already talked with all that with Kimberly. They're already on top of it. The things that happened because there was a lot of turnover in staff in large part, as well as there were a lot of the reconciliation of some of the financial information that hadn't been done timely, and they were backlogged with it. So they've done a good job, all considering getting it to this point. So we just want to make you aware of all of that. So that's all I'm going to say about the letter. You can read it at your convenience. If you have any questions while I'm doing this, you can stop me anytime you want. I'll try to answer you if I can. And if I can't, I'll tell you I can't, but I'll try to find you an answer. And also, if you have questions after tonight, you can talk with Kimberly, and she can get up with us, and we'll try to help you with your answers. So if you go to page 4 on the presentation summary, you're going to see a lot of data and numbers. I'm not going to read all those numbers either, but those create the links that creates the charts starting on page 6. So if you can go to page 6, you can see that the chart at the top is an analysis of your fund balance, and that's the general fund balance. And this is a 5-year trend, so you can just kind of see how you're going up or down on all of these charts for the most part. On total fund balance in 2021 is about $25.7 million, and the restricted and assigned portion of that in the red is about $15.7 million. Your fund balance available, which is the total fund balance less restricted from by state statute, is in the. We're looking at that as a available balance as a percentage of your general fund expenditures, and the blue line represents New Bern. The red line represents other towns of similar population. I think y'all are in the 10 to 50,000 range for population. I think you're about 30,000. I'm not sure, but I think that's about right. So you can see that your available fund balance as a percentage of your general fund expenditures is 34.21% at June 30, 2021. And for the state average for the towns of similar size, you can see for 2020 is 44.06. The only reason we don't have 2021 for the other towns is because they don't all have them sent in yet and processed. So we don't have that data available from the state as of now. On page 7, we're going to look at the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the general fund expenditures, which is very similar to the other report, only instead of it being the available, it's also the unassigned. The difference between available and unassigned is that, as I said before, the total fund balance less restrictions by state statute is the available, but the unassigned is not only restricted by state statute from the state, but anything that you've already committed and earmarked for. So this one is the one that you still have some leeway on.
Hey, may I ask you a quick question? Could you please go back to page 6?
Sure.
And the 34.21% versus the 44.06%, did you take in consideration the outstanding FEMA funds that we still have not received?
It's, you don't, I mean, if you haven't gotten it, you haven't gotten it yet, but that will bring it up when you receive it, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, there's several $1 million outstanding with FEMA right now
Yeah, you're
that
not
we've
only-
paid for, that we're waiting for reimbursement.
Right, absolutely.
It's
And you're not the
allocated.
only ones. I've seen that a lot, so.
Got you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we're ready to go back to page 7? Okay. All right, so at the top, your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the general fund expenditures is 30.34% in that case. The chart at the bottom is an analysis of your revenues over and under your expenditures before transfers and contributions for the funds you see there, the general fund, the electric fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. And the revenues over, basically the surplus of revenues over expenditures for the general fund, actually it's a deficit of 2.6 million. The electric fund, you've got a surplus of 4.8 million. The water fund, 2.4 million, and the sewer fund, 1.5 million. On page 8, we have an analysis of your cash and your fund balances. Cash balances is obviously the money in the bank. The fund balances are the difference between the assets and liabilities, basically. And you can see those by the fund, the amounts that you see there for both the cash balances and fund balance, the amounts are underneath. On page 9, at the top, we got your property tax rates. New Bern's tax rates are in the blue, and again, the weighted average of other towns of similar size are in the red. And so you can see how your tax rates compare to other towns with similar population. So you can see yours is 48.2 cents per hundred. In 2021, once again, the state don't have the 2021 data for us for the averages, but you can see all the way up through 2020 what the others are. And then at the bottom, we got the collection percentages, and so you can see the blue is New Bern, 99.44%. That's excellent. The group weighted average is in the red, and then the state, it doesn't matter what population they have, all towns are the green. On page 10, we're going to break down your general fund revenue by categories, and you can see here that your ad valorem tax is your largest, followed by your intergovernmental revenues, which are basically local option sales tax and other distributions from the state primarily. And then the third largest is your other taxes and licenses, and primarily that's building permits. And likewise, on the bottom, we're breaking down the general fund expenditures by categories, and you can see here that the public safety is your largest, followed by your public works, and then your cultural and recreational expenditures. And on page 11, this is just some information about addressing the LGC on those findings that I spoke about before. That's just a reminder in this presentation that it has to be done. So. And with that, I mean, that basically concludes my presentation, unless you have some other questions, or like I say, as of now, or even later, you can contact us, and we'll try to get you an answer.
Okay, does the board have some questions? Some things that we probably maybe would have some questions we talked about during our workshop.
Right.
While the board is getting geared up to ask a few questions on the budget this size, first I want to say thanks to the staff. I think this audit this year is about 30 pages longer than last year's. And when I first got this, and like I always like to compare it to last year, see if any numbers kind of stand out. Just the pure volume and the comprehensive review. I think I've always asked this question, and it's within the scope of the audit. There are other things that probably during the year the board could and should be doing. Nothing on the forensic end, but just from fiduciary accountability. Do you have any recommendations at this time from your audit this year of any additional items you think we should review, look into, maybe get a particular internal audit of anything? Or I noticed that I think accounts receivable is up a little bit this year. Accordingly, you can understand that.
Sure.
I'm sure most benchmarks would show that.
Right.
So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good idea to have some internal auditing throughout the year, because frankly, when we come in once a year, we can only do so much, so it's if nothing else, it keeps people honest. And so that's always a good idea. And you can probably designate somebody to be an internal auditor, or that be part of somebody's job, and they may already be doing some of that. I'm not sure, but I do know, like you said too, with Kimberly and the staff, and we certainly appreciate them, because we couldn't do our audit if they didn't give us the information and answer questions all through the process. And so it appears that they've done a good job with what they had, when coming in. So, but it is a good idea to have an internal audit.
A couple things that I do want to ask you. I know I want you to kind of help us from other cities that you deal with. We have relationships with the Fireman's Museum, the New Bern Craven County Library, Housing Authority, and those are mentioned in there as things that do not include the audit. Some years ago, the Board of Aldermen decided that if we were going to have any type of a funding relationship with some of these, Swiss Bear, et cetera, that we wanted to have a copy of their annual audit. Right. To make sure that we were doing business with folks that were similarly being audited, et cetera. Do you have any recommendations as far as anything other than what your audit? I think it's on page I. You comment that you've been through a lot of things, but that the House Authority, the Library, Swiss Bear, Friends of Fireman's Museum do not meet the criteria for accountability on our part. Have you ever seen a city, county? I mean, the city, I assume, is somewhat indemnified with these organizations, but do you ever have any recommendations on that?
I mean, you certainly, as you say, you want to be associated with things that are proper and reputable, and so you certainly should be able to get a copy of their audit. We also, a lot of times, we have in the notes to the financial statements. There's lots of financial data and numbers in the audit report, but there's also a section that's notes, and there's several pages. And a lot of times it's like joint ventures, or whatever that is, whatever you want to call it, that we sometimes put some verbiage in there about how the relationship is with that, and what the relationship is. So that's good to have.
Well, you mentioned them in here, so that's if you mentioned them in this audit, I thought maybe I'd ask that question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question. As far as very few do it, and I think our new public works director might be familiar with it from reading up on him, but some cities actually have a public works enterprise, have you ever actually seen, you traditionally think of water, sewer, and electricity as being enterprise funds. Do you have any other type of fund sources other cities are using, looking into as far as additional revenues that provide a service and a win-win for everybody? Do you have any clients like that?
Most of the towns that I can think of, some of them have electric, some of them don't. I know y'all do. Water, sewer, sanitation sometimes, is in the proprietary funds. And those are the typical towns.
Okay. I'm going to stop because I do have a few more questions, but the board, let's go right ahead.
Just a question on the OPEB liability. It grew quite a bit. Was that a normal rate of increase this year, or was there some different factor that came into play?
Well, the OPEB, basically you have an actuary, I don't know if y'all use McDonald, Kavanaugh McDonald, most people do, have an actuary, and, I'm just a lowly CPA, but I don't understand all that actuary stuff entirely. But they do an actuary and actuarial report, and the numbers all come from that. So it just depends on how many and how.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
That's
Mr. Evans, let me hear that question again.
So our OPEB liability grew from last year of 35 million to now basically 44 million. So it's almost a $9 million increase in 1 year.
Yeah,
And obviously that would be, you can't sustain that if that was the norm every year. I didn't look back to see what it has been in the past, but it's got to be higher.
What
this year.
page are you on?
I'm on the full audit on page 44.
44. Let's take a look at that just a second.
Because I know a couple years that I think the LGC started requiring us to show that.
Yeah, you have to do that, and the actuaries had to make a prior period adjustment back in, 4 or 5 years ago, and everybody's went sky high.
Right.
It was really ridiculous how it went, but it's based on the retirees, how many retirees you got. I don't know if you got extra retirees now than you had before.
Okay.
And basically.
Let's say that next year we come back to do this again.
Sure.
And the city of New Bern has instituted extreme leveraging opportunities as far as a higher yield on our investments, that we have instituted a wellness program, that we comprehensively with comprehensive sidewalks, et cetera, have our 480 employees out, and we're encouraging, maybe the new Stanley White Center is more of a holistic gathering of even the employees. We do all these innumerable things to increase the wellness of not only the employees but the city. I know that most of these things, depending on what we're talking about tonight, the cap rates can vary from 1.5 up to 7, 8, whatever, depending on what we're talking about. But it's pretty much always a measure of a number of things: investment opportunities, the yield, AAA bonds, et cetera, whatever it might be. Can you tell us ways to improve that number? Because I know, for one, when you go to, you're doing an inflation rate of 2.5, which I wouldn't argue, and this is under Mr. Odom's question, wage growth, wage inflation, et cetera. When you look at all those things, I don't see in there where the city is fundamentally looking at ways to make that a more favorable figure. I know that one of them in here, you've got us a couple times this audit, you've given us examples of a 1% increase, decrease, and how that will affect the liability of the city of New Bern. And assuming, again, this, Sabrina, every year when we do this, I talk about the unfunded benefits.
Benefits for the employees.
Those type things, and, Charlotte's like 300 million now, and
Well, we can't cap the number of retirees per year. It just seemed like in this last year, we did have a lot of retirees. I think back hearing people, we have people, retiring, whatever, so I guess that's the fluctuation maybe.
But if you had 30 healthy retiree employees versus 20 that were not healthy, your bottom line could be on parity, is that
But our
right?
benefits don't, you
Depending-
have to work
depending on
30
number of
years to get
factors.
the benefits? Is it 30 years you have to work to get the health benefits, otherwise?
Well, you can work 20, or most of the time it's 25, but 30 you get full benefits, is that right? You would know,
30 is full.
but 25 you can start with.
25. So basically, you're saying we need to implement a wellness program?
Yeah, I mean,
That's one.
well,
Well, one that forces them to go out and do a lap around the city?
I'm just offering, I mean, we don't want to just rubber stamp these things every year, because one thing in particular could change the bottom line of all this stuff is those cap rates you're using.
Oh, I agree. I agree with what
I don't know, I
you're
agree
saying.
with one of them, but
Well, those are those things that Kavanaugh McDonald, I mean, these numbers, the 2.5 and the 1% lower and 1% higher comes right out of their report.
and they get it out of some benchmark somewhere, is that
Yes,
correct?
That's exactly
And
right.
it's not very, in other words, you take 10 cities, obviously there's one that's very unhealthy, one that's very healthy, and you're using the same cap rate, is that right? Probably.
Probably.
Yep.
So that right there is probably, we could do better. I mean, and I do want to say this, again, it's only because this thing is 30 pages longer. It's because we got a lot of money that we're wanting to get in we haven't seen yet. Our fund balances sometimes look very marginal and they're very good. It's just we're waiting on FEMA reimbursement.
Right.
But, when you look into this budget, if we have 65, 70% fund balance, that's not good. That needs to be reinvested, particularly in a lot of our public needs that we have around here. We've already been talking about infrastructure. So I'll just end it with that on cap rates for right now. Do you have any other comments about that?
Not right off the top of my head.
Because what I'm saying to you is this, every year, we are asked to sign a piece of paper, basically for your audit, that says, do we have any concerns?
Right.
And if you came and saw me for 2 hours, I would have a lot more concerns than if you asked me to sign a piece of paper. On that piece of paper, I might say, maybe we need a wellness program. Maybe we need to not have an 80% fund balance. Maybe we ought to be reinvesting this instead of putting it in the bank. But I don't say any of that because all I'm asked from the audit team is to sign a piece of paper. Is that correct?
I'm just saying if there's any illegal activity, if you think there's any.
Yeah,
illegal
but,
activity, it's nothing specific.
I certainly hope next year that the audit will consist of somebody from your firm and some staff sitting down with at least 2 or 3 of the aldermen, so we don't have a quorum, and let them tell you, because you'll get a lot more out of them than if you ask them to sign a piece of paper. But,
I agree.
I mean, is that what you do everywhere, or do other cities want to meet to talk about all this stuff? So I won't belabor the point when we have an audit discussion.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we do have some that ask for those things, and some just
Sign the paper.
roll along. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's fair to the citizens to rubber stamp this audit and not ask a bunch of questions
Right.
when it's proposed.
We have
It's
to.
$100 million plus, that's a chunk of change. Yes, sir.
I just had one more question. I couldn't quite make out, did a negative project fund balance while we're waiting for FEMA reimbursement, did that count as a finding on this audit?
It did.
It did. So we can thank FEMA for not only dragging their feet on many things, but they also caused us to have a finding on our audit. Is that,
It's a fair statement, I think.
okay. I thought that's what it said, and I said, no, that can't be it. So I wanted to ask. I'm glad I did. So thank you.
Okay, questions of the board? Okay, while we're not asking questions, I'll go back and ask a few, and then maybe it'll, some of these, like I say, we've already been answered at ARP. PAL fund, George, did you get those figures for the last 5 or 10 years on PAL fund? Well, Danny, you remember, weren't PAL funds 600,000 or so most Okay, and I know I'm reading this wrong, because on page 27, if you could go to that, so that I'm reading this thing correctly. It has a figure for restricted for streets of 376,471. What is that? It's not POW funds.
Which page?
Is that the allocation in our budget for what we're going to spend on streets this year?
Which page did you say?
Sir?
That's MSD.
That's MSD. MSD is
What
going
page was
to,
that?
page 27. MSD is going to spend 376,000. I just want to know if that is streets line item or if there's other improvements. Is that sidewalks? I just don't quite understand the figure.
Restricted for streets? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
What that is the payment that we make for the streetscape. So,
Okay,
you know
well,
how we funded the streetscape, I believe, is that right, Kim? That's the breakdown, the money that we're paying back on the streetscape?
Well, see, it says restricted for streets.
Every
That,
5 years or something.
I didn't know that MSD did that kind of street repaving or,
But we
whatever.
borrow the money, so that's the payment that we make.
it's what?
MSD money.
So MSD paid $376,000 worth of streets.
Well, yeah, it's the loan, the streetscape, remember? when we
Oh,
went
so
to
that,
utilities? Yes.
I'm just asking now,
Yeah,
because this.
but you
this-
understand, you understand, you know how we were doing a street at a time and
Right.
a section at a time where we borrowed the money, and this is the payment that we made.
So this is streetscapes.
I don't think that's right.
You don't think that's
I
right?
think the 732,000 is the MSD restricted funds. And then the restricted for streets, it calls out right here is POW bill funds are also classified as restricted cash. And that's the only other line item would be 376. It seems low.
Well, I mean, POW funds are 600,000, and with the
That's
city
about our
taking,
payment. That's
sorry,
about our
ma'am?
pay- That's about our payment, though. our
Well,
payment.
you know, what triggered that for me is we sat down here and negotiated a bridge, and we put 13 more miles of roads on us to get rid of that bridge. And part of figuring that thing out was that we were gonna get POW funds back to help keep the streets up. So if anything, Danny, if it was 600, it certainly wouldn't be 300 now, it would be some bigger figure. But this being MSD, I don't think this has to do with POW funds. So, anyway,
Well, their explanation is wrong, if that's what you're saying, because it says POW bill funds are restricted, and it's on that line item.
Kim, we need to sit down and we can look at that. Maybe it's just that they're talking about different types of restricted funds and they lumped them all together. And the MSD is that, and then restricted POW funds is the next step, but just put it all there, making it look like it was all part of MSD. That's the only thing I can think of. But I picked it up. I thought that's what our debt service.
we had talked some years ago and answer for me if anybody does this, is there a Bible of sorts of terms, definitions, line item, acronym, explanations that other cities do so that I don't belabor this point, like do some cities have a manual book to go, a definition book? So that probably all my questions are just questions about the title. Do any cities do that?
That they probably do. I've seen a few that had some, not a whole lot, but you know, some of them have their terminologies and they try
I
to
think-
keep up with it that way.
I think what you stated before, Mayor, you know, because I've been around for these 4 years now, and the way that you do ask the questions, I think like what you said for next year or, you know, the coming year, that it would be important for, you know, not a quorum, but us to sit down and really analyze and go through this, because it's hard to kind of go through and answer all the questions in a, you know, in a regular setting board meeting.
Okay.
You know what I mean, to implement, so I do agree, because
Well,
you
and
see some
I'll run here to that
discrepancies.
point. I think some of the board members had concern that some of the times we were getting these audits the night of the audit meeting.
Right,
Is that
right,
correct?
That is correct.
And thank staff that we got this last week. And a little bit of trouble I'm having up here tonight is that I read through all this stuff on the computer, and now I've got this, and I'm having a little problem transposing from my notes,
Right.
which are off the computer, to
The
paper
book.
now. So, you know, again, guys, would you say maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, be real nice to have it, kind of ask these questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a term I need an answer to. It's on page 45. You have year ended June 30th of 22 through 26, and you got all these totals. And what is the term thereafter? In other words, obviously, it's a summation of all those figures. So what does that mean exactly, thereafter?
On which page are you talking about?
Well, I'm on page 45. In other words, thereafter, to me, would mean somewhat of a trending forecast figure for maybe the next year, but the term thereafter is actually a summation of years 22 through 26. What does that term mean?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it basically, they get a 5-year specific
Projection.
numbers, and then the thereafter is going to be multiple years there. I mean, it's not going to be all 1 year. It's not going to be 2027, it's 27, 28, however far it goes out, and that's again from the actuaries.
Kim, is that, this is another question I think
Yeah,
board
that
might
don't
know.
make
Who writes
sense.
all this stuff up?
That don't make
Do you
sense.
write all this up?
We do, somebody in our firm does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do some, we got other people that do them as well. But that information comes directly
Okay.
from the actuary report.
Right.
That she will have that report as well.
Well, see, all during the year, 365 days a year, the board interacts with the staff. And I think they have a pretty good pulse on the finances. Then an auditor comes in
Right.
and audits it and semantically writes it up in that particular audit firm's mannerisms of
Right.
how they want to write it. And then, like say in the past, we get it the night of the meeting.
Right.
This time we got it like 5 days ahead of time. But still trying to figure out, when we've been talking to staff, and we have a comfort level with staff, and now we're getting it from the auditor, it's not the same flow.
Is it in our, benefit to almost have like an audit committee of aldermen that would, meet, they would work it and then meet before this draft comes out, and look at it, have some questions, work with the auditor, and then again get it 5 days so that there's some alderman interaction through the process?
I mean, I think that is, amenable, but my thing is if we got this a week ago, did we have to have the meeting scheduled today? Was there a deadline for him to present it, or are we?
Well, I'm
allowed to push
not
it
going
out?
to not vote for the auditor tonight.
No,
But I am gonna ask some
I'm just
questions.
saying, when we do get it on the agenda, when we get it physically, should we wait a month or wait a meeting to push it out? Like in regards to him actually presenting it for us to be able to go over the information?
And
Well,
this-
I'm sorry, I actually would like to see maybe even a couple-hour work session with staff to go over it with us before.
Yeah,
Before, I mean, educate us a little bit on this stuff,
yeah.
And Alderwoman Harris, in this instance, our deadline was coming up. It's January 31st. We had requested an extension on this based on the issues we had in this past year with staff turnover and things. In the future, absolutely, we're more than happy to set a meeting, small groups to meet with all the aldermen to go over this information when we get the audit, and then have a meeting 2 weeks later after everyone's digested the information, come back and have any
So
final
were they
questions.
waiting on us to provide information to complete their audit?
No.
We were waiting on them.
No?
No.
That's more of a problem.
No, it was more staff trying to make sure they had everything that the
Gotcha.
auditors need.
Okay.
Yes.
Page 48, and I know this probably is not within the scope of the audit, but any good city to me about once every 5 years would sit down with all these installment loan purchases, and not that we're flush with cash. Kim, have you had a chance to look at all these on page 48 and 47? And are there some that it would not totally hurt our fund balance and some of the things we're wanting to do, that it would be in the best interest to see we would pay some of these off, or
Yeah, right.
maybe combine them, or get with a bank and merge 2-3 of them? Are we looking into that?
So, yes, we actually have been talking about
Yeah.
possibly, yes, we have been looking at that. haven't been able to dive deep into that just yet, but we are currently working with, I don't know if you recall when we hired Debt Book to put that whole schedule together so we can take a look at it and have some report mechanisms available, and then work with refinancing some of these possibly, especially since, we got to take and look at the interest rates and see if we'll get a better rate at this time, or if it even really makes sense. Some of them I can see where it would make sense to pay off, but again, I haven't really been able to dive deep in that.
Well, 2 of them mature this year.
Mm-hmm.
3, 4 mature this.
Yeah, there's, in the next, I believe in the next couple of years, I saw where there was 2 that were paid off, and then in 2025, I think there was another one. So, but again, I'm sorry, I wasn't really necessarily ready for that question, but I can
Okay.
come back with.
Page 83, I got a question. Revenues right there on the first row, disaster grant, you had project authorization prior years, completed project, and the variance is a negative 127. Is that because, what's going on there? Are we just not, we haven't gotten funded? Is that something that we were waiting on? What is the figure 127,599? Why is that a negative figure? Page 83.
Okay, so basically what that is your budget. Let's see.
It's the same number as the authorization is what I don't quite understand, because I don't think it stayed right with the project authorization. The prior year was 110,226.
Right.
This is FEMA Hurricane Irene, and we're not closed out yet, along with Dorian, and we're not closed yet. Why, Bobby, why is that still open?
Why is FEMA doing everything they're doing? I thought we had closed Irene, though, had we not,
Yeah, I
Kim,
mean,
recently?
that can be closed out, but I mean, you have to.
I mean, when we do a little budget amendment and close this thing out, what do we do?
All you got to do is you're going to, if it's your money, you can transfer the fund balance back to the general fund or whatever. So, but
Okay,
you got to do
are
that.
you making that recommendation?
If you're through with all that.
And then we could, looking at that page, could we then close that Hurricane Irene out?
Yeah, I mean, and any that you're done with, you
Right.
should. I mean, it's unless you got some more stuff coming. We don't know if you got some more stuff coming from it, but if not, it shouldn't sit there year after year after year.
Yes.
But wouldn't that not be a question of you to ask them?
We do most of the time. I don't know. If
But did you this time?
I wasn't doing all the work on it. I don't know for sure.
So, as of June 30th, 2021, we would have had to do the, assess this, do the transfers, and do the budget amendment to accommodate that. If you remember back on June of 2021 leading into July there, we really didn't have the capacity to do that at that time. And so normally we would have looked at this through the budget amendment process. We would have made the necessary adjustments and transfers and budget, transfer recommendations to the board, and we would have cleaned that up. That would have been part of the year-end cleanup process. And we just didn't have that time to do that before we were done with that fiscal year. Because of the backlog of work and things that we were already dealing with, that was kind of, we were beyond that at that point. The year already closed and we were able to really dive into reconciling and looking at it, so.
Okay, so is this something you think that we can work on next?
Absolutely,
couple weeks?
absolutely. Now this is done, we will be, I'm guessing there'll be another one as well. I cannot recall which one it was that I had seen at the end of the year, or when I was doing the audit, but those project funds will be closed out.
Okay.
They've been out there for quite some time, I believe.
Okay.
I appreciate that answer that you gave, Kim, being, transparent, and, everyone knows what we've gone through as a city, COVID and everything, so, I appreciate you being, honest. Thank you.
Does the board have questions?
Do you have another question?
No, right here.
No, I'm saying, do you have a
I
question?
do, I have one on page. No, I mean, when you see something 30 pages long, it's either we're in 30 pages worse shape, or somebody's doing a much better job, or we weren't getting enough stuff last year. And so, I just sat there and the more I looked at it, and I hope you guys know I don't normally ask this many questions. I'll ask a few questions. Page 100. My note is, again, transposing, the figure was $2,905,775. And under Public Works, there's $2,791,000. So I see where you got that excess $2,905,775. And this is coming out of the City of New Bern non-major capital projects improvements. When you have something with that much, with that substantial a number of figures, should you be doing a budget amendment to correct that? Or is that okay for that thing to lay over, as we are, the fund balance is in the hole, $1,728,000. I'm just asking that on some of these, do we need to kind of, even if we have to hire the gentleman here to kind of catch us up, are there some of these things that need to be reviewed and caught up on as far as closing out or making some adjustments?
So this won't be a problem moving forward. It was a problem because of the timing at the end of June with the budget amendment that happened, as well as the staff changes, and then not having the staff available to take a look at that and prepare for that. But so these negative fund balances are a result of that, and we've talked about it, that those budget transfers need to be done, and we need to take that to you before June 30th. So because we didn't, that caused us to have to take another hit of the negative fund balance finding.
Well, I'm just asking to kind of catch us all up if we need to be called up. Do we need to hire like the gentleman here with his firm or somebody to come in here and review over some of these items and see how to modify them to clean them up, see if there's fund balance, if there's adjustments, budget amendment adjustments, et cetera, or they need to be closed out, et cetera?
I don't think that we have, we surely can. I'm open to that if that's what you want to do, but I think that we have the staff that can handle it. We're very competent and can, now that we've got this audit behind us, really take a look at what needs to happen in the next 6 months. So we just didn't have the capacity, we didn't have the time, and I apologize for that.
Well, I'm going to get off the finance folks for a moment, and I'm going to go to the fire department I met, which is on page 149, Chief Alderman Asker.
You better call him Chief Alderman Boyd.
Well, you're the politics end of this, so the response times down here,
What page was that again?
response time,
What page again?
again, I've got to transpose my note, but page 149 is 63.87% of the time we're responding within 90 seconds to a call. And the average is 78 to 85% of the time. And this is not really an accounting question, but it's in the audit.
Where do you
That's
see
police.
that?
And, well,
That's
if you
police,
look,
it's not fire.
if you look, what page are the response times?
On 149 above, it says police answer 90% of calls in 10 seconds.
Right.
That's police. Dispatch emergency call in 90 seconds, dispatch non-emergent call in 15 minutes. That's under police.
Right,
But
right,
I don't see anything like that under fire.
right.
Unless it's somewhere
And I
else.
won't belabor that tonight, we'll do that later, I'll talk with staff, but I was very concerned that one of the figures, when I thought we were improving on response time, it looked like on the 90 seconds it had gone down a little bit. Does the board have other questions? I overall thank you for your work. I certainly thank the staff. I do have other questions, but I'm not going to sit here and try to transpose it and hold up the board's time or the public's. Does the other alderman have questions? I do have other ones, but I'll ask you later.
I just see that this is a very concerned situation here and a very complex situation that needs to be dealt with immediately and get this thing nipped in the bud.
And moving forward, I don't think we need a committee, but I do think that it would behoove us to have some sort of workshops or something in regards to, this, so it's not even a week or 2 weeks, because you really can't sit here and analyze this in a week either, because you need the other person there to be able to, or staff that we have to ask questions beforehand. So, I think it's important that we do that. So I do agree with Alderman Bingo on that one, and the mayor.
Okay. Do you have any comments on page 157? You make one comment there, and I'll ask you if you have any comments about that. I won't make any comments. Page 157. You're our auditor.
Okay, so that's, the 157 is your schedule of findings and collection of costs. Basically, that's a required report that goes in the audit. And basically, is the no's are good, and the yes may need some work.
Well, this is a public document.
Yes.
I'd rather get the answers if we need answers to anything here than somebody call me tomorrow and I ain't got a clue what that page is and why that thing's checked yes. And
That's yes because of those findings. If those findings weren't there, that would be a no.
Okay.
So basically, I got a question.
Yes.
Basically, when you come to check the checkbook out, to balance it out, it's based on the information that you are given.
Correct. We also test the things. We get random check numbers and check it to the invoice to make sure that what was paid was what the invoice was and that there was a PO for it, and so that you process it. So we test your procedures, as well as just take it at face value. So
Yeah, just like tonight, the questions that we brought back to you,
right.
that we was looking to get a pretty open answer from you.
Do you test things like when I write a check $200, 100 goes to electric, 50 goes to water, 50 goes to sewer, or do you test whether or not, however that works, when that check is deposited, does the electric enterprise fund, water enterprise, sewer, does that money funnel equitably?
Basically, we do that. We do check not only that the check matches the invoice, but we test the general ledger account numbers that it gets posted to make sure it's reasonable.
Okay, do you do like a 10% test, or do you just anomaly do the 1 or 2, or what?
No, for the cash disbursements, we do other tests just aside from cash disbursements. We typically pull 40 random checks out of your beginning and ending check numbers, and we have a randomizer on the computer that spits out the check numbers that we need to go look at, and that's just random check numbers.
Do you look at any areas that the city, and this is one that somebody like yourself would have the expertise, maybe staff, when a citizen of New Bern city limits is buying power from Duke and they're paying taxes, there is a refundable amount of that goes back to could go back to the municipality do you test things like that to make sure that we're not missing out on any monies that way?
I'm not going to say we go looking for that specifically, but I mean, if we see that on a document or something, we may ask questions about when does that come in and
Okay.
where did it go, you know.
Kim, you familiar with that?
So I guess what I want to say is that they have access to view in our financial system. So they have been, during that audit process, when they're doing their testing, they're able to go in, even though we're providing them information, they're also able to test that through our financial system and follow it through and make sure that we're following our own internal controls and policies and procedures, as well as, that it's accurate. So I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. I just was kind of on the thought from the previous question. But
Well, you go to these workshops and there's always these specialists that swear they can come to your city and find all this money, you know? And I don't know that it's worth chasing some of it. I don't think it's that much for the amount of staff and time, resources it would take to collect it.
Right.
You know, you have to pick your battles or your accounts receivable skirmishes, you know, in my book. I don't have any other questions. Board have questions?
No question, but I'll tell you, our PAL bill money was $759,585.
Well.
So that's not that number that's on that.
Well, when I see something says street, and it's $300,000, and, I mean, I understand it was under MSD, I just don't have a clue.
I believe it was, and I'd like to go back and look, but I believe it's unspent power bill monies, that if you were talking about the restricted line. So I think that's what that is. But I will follow up with you on that.
That'll be great to know if we
Yeah,
have
if we have
$360,000 and
Well,
everything has.
MSD would have that, right?
No, I think she's just saying that was a summary of restricted funds. MSD is one restricted
Line
fund,
item.
and the PAL bill fund is another restricted fund.
Yeah, but that money is in MSD
So if
line item.
we got that sitting around.
Huh?
I said, that's sitting around unspent power bill money. You're saying it's unspent money.
Well, you're only allowed to spend certain expenditures on that, right? And so
Right.
if you don't spend it, you have to restrict it.
Yeah.
For future expenses. But if I could comment before we go, I think that it's really important to have, whether it's a finance committee or meet ahead of time, and we plan to do that this coming audit season. So when we finish up, I would love to have that time for you to go over it, to explain the audit to you, to have more, charts to show you where the changes, what we saw on our end, and be able to have this provide you more, data to understand, more information for you that you can use. So I get it, there's a lot of information. It's a lot to ingest, and you just can't ingest it in a week, and you do need somebody to break it out. So I definitely am in favor of that.
Oh, absolutely.
I
me
think
too.
it's great. And that's actually where we, what my background is with my previous employers, we did the same thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Okay, board, what's pleasure board on this item?
You got to sign.
Now you gotta make a motion.
Oh, okay.
Number 6.
Well, I'd like to make a mo.
Do we approve this?
Do we have to,
Yeah, we don't approve it.
Yes. I didn't think so, because it was just a presentation.
Mr. Davis, what action would you like on this item?
I'm not aware of any action, Mayor.
Sir?
Okay.
I'm not aware of any action.
Thank you, sir. And we thank you for your presentation and staff for your hard work.
Thank you for having me, and we appreciate it. And get with her if you have questions.
Yes, sir, thank you. And get with us next year, really. I know I speak for the board. They would probably like to sit down and just, not that they have. And if you could get it to me 4 or 5 days earlier, I wouldn't be trying to transpose the notes like I was. I'm sorry. All right, anything else on that item? Mr. Hughes?
No, sir.
Let's go to the next item.
All right. Next item is conduct a public hearing and consider adopting an ordinance to establish electric rate schedules for electric vehicle charging stations. At this time, I'd like to ask Charlie Bouchard to come up and give some background information on this.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I have some good news tonight. As Mr. Hughes previously mentioned, I'm requesting your consideration towards adopting 2 new electric rate schedules. These schedules are designed to provide a service for the growing electric vehicle market. They also offer consumers additional choice for charging electric vehicles within our community. As you were presented, Schedule 14 is available to commercial businesses that desire to operate large-scale charging stations and then resell the energy to electric vehicle operators. The station owner in this case is the reseller of the energy, and they'll determine what the resale price is. You may also notice in the ordinance revisions that I provided, the red line text, I'm excluding these type of charging situations, stations, from our other commercial rate structures. Schedule 15 is exclusive to city-owned charging stations where energy is sold directly to the electric vehicle operator, and use of the charging station is not exclusive to City of New Bern electric customers. I believe both rate schedules have been designed to recover the utility's cost of service and provide the consumer with an affordable rate. And I'd be happy to answer any of your questions or go into more detail if you like.
Charlie, I think that your rate, I don't have in front of 68 cent, whatever, and the norm, you and I talked about EV and all them is like 45. I think we're pretty well covered that we're going to be good with your rate structure. And I appreciate you taking an hour or so the other day with me, but so that everybody understands, there's one here where the Tesla over at Smithfield's has a separate transformer and a meter to wholesale sell, well, to retail from our wholesale, sell that to actually Tesla. Is that correct?
Correctly. It's open to Tesla customers at this time. Word on the street and the news is that Tesla may open that site to other charging, to other manufacturers, but they'd have to buy an adapter to.
And so much like some folks around town, like City of New Bern, rent out an ATM spot, Smithfield's has just worked out some agreement with Tesla.
Correct.
They haven't. And from our talks, my recommendation is to get started on making our city friendly to all folks that want to travel. You know, we got to do some of this, but from, you know, at 68 cent a kilowatt hour or 0.68, whatever it was, it's like a lot of things that we do in government. It doesn't figure out the shelf life of that meter out there, the maintenance on it, blah, blah, blah. And so if you incorporate all that, plus that's not even, that's a straight wire to the meter itself. That's where you're going to get your reading. There's not a meter before the meter. You're getting your readings off whatever that's doing straight from the meter itself, not from a meter, right?
We have a redundant meter out there, so we can keep track.
So a lot of cities are letting folks charge free.
Some cases.
And they're doing it to encourage them to stop at the restaurant, stop at the dress shop, stop and get the trinket. But I think you mentioned that the settlement with Volkswagen, that New Bern could qualify for 2 more. Is that correct?
Yes, maybe even more. We don't know the details yet, but Volkswagen has announced that there's another round of grants that we may want to consider. So we'll be exploring that concurrently with the operation of these units.
Well, I just want to mention to the board that to me, if we were going to get 2 more, I would want them, my 2 cents worth, around an area that not only people might shop and go to a restaurant, but might stop and exercise, etc. And I think in a location like the new Stanley White on Broad Street, somewhere having charging stations there to get folks in other areas of town, just besides downtown, charging. I don't think every charging station has to be at Union Point or at the library or you know, at that parking lot over there. And this is something that the board would want to think about, other locations, but from what I read, I don't think we want to be in the charging business anymore than we have to, when there's others that can do that.
That's what this grant is designed to help us learn. This is basically a pilot project. We're exploring new territory, and we're on the cutting edge. We're learning a lot from staff's experience. We're also learning a lot in the consumer market and what the consumer is demanding as a product from the utility. So I think over the next year or so, as we see what the adoption rate is on this charger, we'll be in a better position to know if that's the business we want to be in or need to be in.
I won't private enterprise be in it because of the liability of
Well,
when
that's
the batteries
my
blow
question
up.
is, I just want to make sure I understand, you know, how they pay for it. So you're actually going to have a card swipe there? No. How do they pay for it?
They sign up with an app right through the vendor. And these drivers that are doing this, they know that. Sometimes the app is mobile, sometimes the app is built into the technology of the car, but you're not going to, on that
So
particular.
we don't, but how do we get paid? Then the vendor that they are going to, through the app,
We have
then pays us?
Correct. We have an agreement with a third party that does all the cashiering for us. We don't do any customer service. We're not
Because I was
collecting.
concerned about that cost being.
Correct.
Charlie, what's your profit margin factored into these rates?
We don't have a profit margin. We calculate, we design our rates for cost of service. So we recover all the cost of energy, we cover the cost of the station, we cover the cost of depreciation, we cover the contribution to the general fund. We don't put a profit margin as other businesses know into the rate.
So you mentioned several things. Did you cover the cost of our agreement with the vendor for us to get paid? So
Yes,
that's in there as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the one comment I'll make about, it's ironic, we were talking about power bills a minute ago. We think about, we get, and Public Works, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, we get power bill funding based off of gas tax for the state of North Carolina. So the more electric vehicles that are going to happen in the state of North Carolina, we're going to get less gas tax, which means less revenue that we have to improve our roads. So why would we not, I'm not advocating we gouge anybody, but why would we not somehow factor that into this?
Nobody is, you're absolutely right. Nobody is trying to collect road taxes on the sale of electric or charging electric vehicles, whether it happens at your house, we have no idea. Whether it happens at a level 1 charger at a public rest stop, or it happens at our charging station. What I did provide in the rate schedule was the ability to collect all applicable taxes, so that if the state or anybody else has some other tax they want to add on to this, we can collect it at that time.
Okay.
So the rate that you see in your schedule is plus taxes.
Charlie, in this, as far as rules and procedures, most cities are putting like a 10-minute grace period after the charging is complete, and if the 11th minute, they charge them like 45 cents a minute, because you got 8 cars stacked out there and somebody's gone 3 hours shopping or walking, you know,
Yes, in the rate schedule I'm proposing, I've written in a 17 cents per minute fee to begin effective after 10 minutes of idle charging. Again, this particular station, these type of applications, it's designed for a 30, 40-minute charge. You're not going to park there overnight. It's not going to take you overnight to park. It's very short, very quick, and it's not a parking space, it's a charging space. And if somebody's parked there for a long periods of time and not charging, we want to be able to collect that
Gotcha.
fee.
I didn't catch that. I'm glad you mentioned that.
So with that being said, they get a 10-minute grace period, so their cars finish charging. They stay there for an hour, so they get a 10-minute grace period, so that works out to be $8.50 is what we're going to charge them. What's the revenue loss on an hour of active charging
Depends on what rate, how big the battery is, and the rate that they charge it.
on an average?
Oh, I'm struggling with that one.
Taxing his brain.
$30?
Well, a full charge at 40 kilowatt hours for half an hour, we have $30, $27.
It depends on how popular it's going to be. I know this is a test, but it's probably something we need to be thinking about, because if somebody is taking up a charging space for an hour and we hit them with an $8.50 inactive charge, when somebody else is sitting there that could sit there and actually charge their car for $30.
Correct.
Trial and error.
So
I'm
back-
saying trial and error, so, I mean, obviously, you're going to be analyzing
Oh, yes, we
what's
really
happening, and
look
if
at all
you
this
start to
data.
see that people are
Part-
just
part-
taking advantage, then it might be right what Alderman Odom's saying in regards to, not gouging the price, but putting it to a point where we're not actually losing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Charlie, tell everybody what you found, like in your research, that, everybody's trying to convert this to a gallon of gas, like $3.15 average gas costs. And some of it, is from $1.50 to about $4.50 is what the conversion rate would be. In other words, like, obviously at 3 in the morning versus somebody on a peak day of 100-degree temperature, the cost to us, to provide that, it's a flat rate over there, right? It's a rate, kilowatt hour rate. It's not by the hour. Some of them are $1.50 hour, whatever. So what comments do you have on that?
Well, you have to recall how we buy power. And it's based on a contract, and it's based on certain rules and the way they measure it. And ideally, we would like to line up the way we sell it to mimic the way we buy it. And this rate structure closely aligns as much as possible with the way we purchase it.
Now, I know you don't even want to talk about it, but, some of the charging stations actually, because 24 hours a day they have canopy, and that canopy has panels on it, they actually kind of somewhat produce, depending on the location and the demand, it kind of breaks even on the recharge. Is that correct? Have
You
seen
talking
that?
about solar panels on cars?
Well, no, on the canopy. They'll put a canopy over the charging station area.
I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
that.
okay. What else the board got?
Do we have to have a public?
We need to have a public hearing.
At this time, I'm going to open a public hearing. Anybody like to come forward and ask questions about this very interesting item, make comments, statements from the pro-green to the anti-green end of it, you're more than welcome to come up.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearing. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. The motion carries.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, we adopt the ordinance to establish electric rate schedules for EV charging stations.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom,
Yes.
Alderman Best,
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey,
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw.
Yes.
Alderman Astor.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris.
Yes.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes.
Motion carries, and so let's go to item number 8. Thank you, Charlie.
And I would just like to say that the charging stations will open tomorrow morning.
Are we going to be advertising that through tourism, let the Visit New Bern people know so they can put it out there for tourists?
Yes, and Colleen is
Chamber.
working on that process now, so you're going to start seeing things all over. And then, of course, the app that Charlie was mentioning, they'll be advertising that to those motorists who go through that service.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is consider a resolution authorizing the manager to execute a letter requesting increased funding from the North Carolina Division of Water Infrastructure Clean Water State Revolving Fund for the Duffyfield Stormwater Enhancement Project. At this time, I'd like to ask Amanda Olenson to come up and give some more information on this program.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Board. Nice to see you tonight. As you all will remember, the city applied for funding through the State Revolving Loan Program. We actually initially applied in the spring of 2020 for a SODRA funding under a resilience program. That was unfunded, so we resubmitted an application under the Clean Water State Revolving Fund in fall of 2020 and found out in March of 2021 that the state was willing to provide $855,000 to the Duffyfield Stormwater Project. We initially applied for Phase 1 funding. By March of 2021, we were already under construction for Phase 1. So the understanding in working with the Division of Water Infrastructure is that we would use that funding toward Phases 2 through 4 of the project with an increased project cost. We were required and have been working with our engineering firm that we have retained for this project, Withers Ravenel, who's worked with us to provide the required engineering report and environmental information documents. We submitted those in July of 2021 and received a response from the state in December of last year, so just, a month ago. And as part of that request, DWI has requested that the city send a letter to increase the funding amount request formally from $855,000 to the entire eligible project cost. So that eligible project cost is outlined in your documents, and that's $3,171,000. The total project cost for Phases 2 through 4 is a little bit higher, but under the Green Infrastructure Program, the park amenities included in the project are not eligible cost. I put a chart in there to kind of outline what the eligible project costs are. We also recently received EEG funding, Environmental Enhancement Grant funding through the North Carolina Attorney General's Office. So we have decreased that grant award of $134,000, which is how we came to that $3.171 million figure. I've also shared with you the cost estimation that the engineering report provides, and as well as kind of a timeline. I would like to reiterate that this letter basically is just for planning purposes. The state encourages us to continue to identify any and all available funding. I will also remind you that we recently applied to FEMA's BRIC program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure Program, for this project. And it is, the SRF funds would be eligible as that local non-federal cost share. So you'll remember from our application that I believe it's about $1.4 million of a local match that would be required if that BRIC project were awarded. And these funds could be used toward that as well as any other grant funds. But otherwise, if BRIC were awarded, the city, might have to use general funds for this. So really, all that we're doing now is providing this number to the state for planning purposes, where they can basically set aside those funds for us. We can continue to go through the process. We will know whether we've been awarded BRIC funding. We will go out for bid on the project to have those exact costs, and then the promissory note would come for the city to then determine the exact loan amount that we would like to request.
So Amanda, my question would be, is any of the stormwater funding that we talked about earlier in our discussion today, would that be eligible to be used in this project? Because if so, even though, you're borrowing, and I assume the additional funds are still at the 0.1%, which is like nothing.
Yes.
Not having to pay it back is better than having to pay it back.
Right.
So.
From, what, staff has looked at thus far, that may be a possibility. Basically, what this does in submitting this letter at this point is gives us flexibility. So we can determine the best use of funds for this project and other projects. I know Jordan and George both said, some projects may be more competitive for these funding sources. We also have retained Withers Ravenel as our resilience consultant. They're working on us with this project. So we've already had those conversations. But basically this trigger point, with the state requesting this letter as part of our final submittal of that EREID document, just will allow us to have flexibility moving forward, to know kind of as a worst case scenario that we have this funding while we kind of determine whether those funds would be best, whether we can obtain additional grant funding, if we're awarded the BRIC funding. So really it just gives us flexibility to kind of, do our due diligence of what would be the best option for the city moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
So Amanda, none of this funding, this increase in funding that you're asking for, this, what is it? I just saw it a few minutes ago. To increase it, from 855,000 up to the, 3.92 million. That has nothing to do, that project, that funding, the increase that you're asking for has nothing to do with the ARP funding.
Correct. It
Okay.
has nothing to do, this
All
is
right.
just strictly those clean water,
Okay,
SRF funds as a green infrastructure project.
okay.
So yes, and I do want to reiterate that it's a 0.1% loan, so
What's the,
basically.
what's the term on it? How long? do we-
So the standard term would be 20 years, with the option potentially, if we can demonstrate that the project has a useful life that is longer, we could potentially be eligible for a term of up to 30 years. And I've did some preliminary math on what the repayment may look like using a loan calculator with our consultant. So if we were to take out the entire $3,171,000 with a 20-year term, that would make the annual principal payment around $158,500. So in year one, that total payment would be just under $162,000. If you took that same full amount out under a 30-year loan, the annual principal payment would be around $105,000 with a year one repayment of just under $109,000. It's probably more likely that if we didn't secure any other funding and wanted to use this as a brick match, that we might be looking at something like $1 million. $1 million with a 20-year term would be an annual principal payment of $33,333, which would be, in year one, would be just over $34,000 as an annual payment. So, that gives you a little bit of an estimation of what we potentially could expect. Those are loose figures based on, the calculator that's provided. But certainly gives confidence that we would know that after we actually are able to bid the project and would want to go to construction.
Let me ask you another question. With this particular project, in conjunction with the North Hills Drive project that I want to have to see come to fruition about the stormwater drainage, is there, with this project already in place, you're asking for additional money, is there any way that you are gonna apply for grant money, funding from the state for this project?
For the North Hills
Yes.
project?
Along with this project, you can't do that?
This is set and awarded for this particular project. It would need to be resubmitted as a new application under any of the funding opportunities through the Division of Water Infrastructure or other funds. So any other project, we can't add in a different scope of project to this work. It has to be for the Duffyfield project, phases 1 through 4. So we couldn't move these funds over to another project at this time.
Thank you.
But we could certainly look at reapplying
Said
in the
check.
future for other projects.
Had to check.
Mayor, I'd like to make, does anybody have any questions?
No, I was gonna make a motion, go ahead.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a letter requesting increased funding for the North Carolina Division of Water Infrastructure Clean Water State Revolving Fund for the Duffyfield Stormwater Enhancement Project.
Second.
Motion and second is there for discussion. Seeing none, let's have a roll call starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle?
Yes?
Alderwoman Harris?
Yes.
Alderman Astor?
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw?
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey?
Yes.
Alderman Best?
Yes?
Alderman Odom?
Yes.
Motion carries. We're going to table number 9. Is that correct, Mr. Hughes?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, let's go to item number 10, appointments. Alderman Bingle.
Yes, I have one appointment tonight. I would like to appoint John Meehan to fill the unexpired term vacated by Michael Markham at the New Bern Firemen's Museum.
Okay, any discussion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Have motion second, is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Alderwoman Harris.
Mayor, not tonight.
Alderman.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Astor. Alderman Kinsey.
No, sir.
Alderman Best.
None,
And
sir.
Alderman Odom.
No, sir.
Okay, at this time, let's go to the attorney's report.
Nothing for tonight, Mayor.
Okay, the city manager's report.
A few items, sir. At the last meeting, the board called for a budget retreat to be held on February 11th at 12 noon. The availability of the location has been determined, and it's necessary for the board to make a new motion to establish that location for February 11th, 12 noon at Development Services in the conference room.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. What else you got, sir?
Next item is, in October, the board adopted a resolution closing specific streets on January 22nd for the annual Shriners Winter Ceremony and Parade. That was canceled this past weekend due to the winter storm. So they have requested the board make a motion to allow the parade to be held this Saturday, January 29th, with the same street closures and times as previously approved.
We had the same problem.
It's
Is
gonna-
there another
yes.
snow date or another rain date?
Okay.
Would we have to, I mean, is there any chance, Mayor, that they would postpone it if the weather is such again, so, because we won't have a meeting for 2 weeks?
I think they're gonna make do best they can. Mr. Davis, anything legally, you got any problems with it?
Just a motion to approve that.
Make a motion, we approve the close.
Second.
And you said we could just do that by
Voice vote.
all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same, motion carries. What else have you got,
And
sir?
one final thing, the New Bern Police Department started their Noble Nights chess activity. That was last night. It was held at the police substation, and I was quite surprised. Chief sent a text to me last night, had 24 participants in the first night, so it was so many that they've requested to go to West New Bern Recreation Center moving forward. So I believe they're going to be over there on Monday nights from 5:30 to 7 p.m. So Chief and PD, great job with that program. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, very good.
Could you give us an update on Martin
Now all we
Marietta?
need is a check point.
Yeah, amen.
If you haven't been out to Martin Marietta lately, new entrance is in place, their curbs, they just put the Martin Marietta main sign up, mulch at the front and things like that. They just put the hours of operation, speed limit signs and all of that stuff up. So I think we're waiting on a few more signs for our display boards, and then we are going to hold a grand opening in February. So we'll probably serve hot dogs and hamburgers and have a big trail walk and do some other nature activities out there. So if you haven't been out there, it's looking really, really good. And when the growing season starts, everything's going to green up. There are a lot of wildflowers that will be blooming as well. So it's going to be very nice out there.
Okay, does the board have any questions of the manager?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Ms. Davis, could you give me an update on the West New Bern Pleasant Hill Park?
On
Community Center?
On the Pleasant Hill Community Center, I was speaking with the contractor today. They are ready to start doing some forming, so the shelter itself is coming down most likely the first of next week. We'll be working with Development Services and the building inspector on getting those permits for construction. So you're going to see some action very soon on that.
Right.
We know that they were delayed on steel for quite a few months. They are still targeted for their steel to come in on April 1st, but they're going to go ahead and get everything else ready to go. So
Thank you.
residents will start seeing a lot of action on that project.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, anybody else on the city manager? Let's go to new business, starting with Alderman Odom,
None tonight, sir.
Alderman Best,
None, sir.
Alderman Kinsey.
Yes, we lost a good person by the name of Alan Toller. He used to decorate Tryon Palace, built stores. He was a quite talented man in the community, and he passed away yesterday.
Wow.
So I'd like for
I just saw
everyone
him
to
in
keep
Harris
his,
Theater about a week ago.
I'd like for everyone to keep his family in prayer.
Alan's daddy, Macon Toller,
Was the chief of
was the
police?
chief of police of New Bern back in the 60s. Yeah. Anything else?
That's it, sir.
Nothing, sir.
Alderman Harris.
Nothing, sir.
Alderman Best.
No, I just want to, again, thank the staff for the great job in keeping everything, free from ice and snow, where they did a good job in getting everything put back together. And I think downtown fared fairly well. The other neighborhoods that I represent, I think everybody was good in the communication was excellent. Our PIO did a great job in getting everything out for the citizens, so I'm really thankful for that. And we also had another loss. Local architect Jerry Walker, who we've all worked with, passed away suddenly yesterday, on Sunday, excuse me. So, I mean, such a wonderful, wonderful guy. And his wife Beth, of course, serves on our redevelopment commission. So I just want to extend my deepest sympathies to the Walker family in his very untimely passing. It's a real loss for me.
And Sabrina, when you told me that, it just made me think about, when I saw you out there at that card table over there at the fire station, the old fire station, and nobody knew where to go with it, and Jerry and Beth kind of took that thing and started that visionary conceptual idea of the fire museum and where it wound up.
I believe the funeral services will be Thursday. It's Cotton Funeral Home if anybody wants to get the information.
Any other new business at this time? If you see a Shriner and you like the Shrine Parade, it's an institution around New Bern, and between the flood several years ago and COVID, just like for everybody else, it's been a trying time for the Shrine. They'll be here Friday and Saturday, and the usual Shriners Parade. So if you see a Shriner and you like and appreciate what they're doing, tell them that, because that's always been a historical, very important thing. Every January, the Shriners come to town, and Sabrina, this year they got like 50 rooms. There were years when, before we got enough hotels, that Shriners to be able to come to New Bern were going to Havelock and Morehead City, elsewhere to get a room because there just weren't enough rooms in New Bern. So tell Shriner,
Thank you.
appreciate what they're doing. At this time, do we need a closed session?
Yes, Mayor, we need to discuss two matters with you pursuant to 143-1311A3 to maintain our attorney-client privilege, pursuant to 143-1311A5 to discuss the potential acquisition of real property, and pursuant to 143-1311A4 to discuss a potential economic development agreement.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. We're going to go into closed session. Hey, Jeff.